Here we are again. I am so delighted that Miss Angela Jenkins is here with me today again, a Senior Vice President for the American National Bank of Texas. And Angela, thank you for coming back and visiting and sharing your wisdom and your thought leadership on topics such as governance and risk and data and insights and all of the interesting things that organizations are focused on right now, and providing your best practices and your perspective. So Angela, kick it off for us. What do you have today that you wish to share with our audience?
All right. So hello to everyone out there, and thank you, Paula, for the wonderful introduction. It's always my favorite time to speak with you. But one thing is, as an operational risk manager is, people, processes, systems, and external events. We always have the risk of loss of those things. So focusing on the people component, which may seem a little odd, or maybe it's not, when you talk about data governance and data information management and how we use data in our day-to-day decision making and how organizations use it. And I really think there is a risk there of not using the people component. In some ways, trying to eliminate it, perhaps intentionally, probably just unintentionally, as they move towards this data-driven decision making and what glorious data that we're allowed to create using various tools and mindsets. But I think the risk is that we sometimes focus too much on that and we forget about the people component, or if you will, that gut feel instinct that that we're used to relying on. I don't think we totally eliminate that. So I think that, that is a challenge as we strive to put a lot of focus on creating quality data and the right data and getting, what we need and cleansing that and making it useful is, how do you integrate the people into that? And that's a key component, because those people that I think, they're the ones that know how to interpret, right? Those are the ones that are getting the insights. But when you have the data driven, it's kind of like a horse in a horse race wearing blinders. They can only see the finish line. They can only see the overarching goal. And nothing else, right? And the numbers or the data is driving, just directly what's in front of them to get to that. Whereas a more data-informed mentality might be the horse without the blinders. So what does that mean? They can see the other horses around them. They can see, who's adjusting this way or that way, or who's going to try to cut in.
It's a great analogy.
Maybe that go on in a horse race, because I don't know how to do it, but the key component is they see what's going around in the world around them, and it's broader than just a data target. So there's, I think that's where you get a little bit confused. You don't want to just have a sales goal, or just have a ROI goal, or return on assets, or any of those other performance metrics that you may have. And there are companies out there that do make market decisions. They make layoff decisions. They make growth and shrinking decisions, and all of those supplier and other components that go into that strictly off a number. And I feel like they're limited, and they're limiting themselves perhaps, because they're missing out not only on the context, but you have the financial, the people, the climate, market conditions, especially now, like in this unique inflationary market that we have right now. And then, the overall culture, not only internally to their bank or their corporation or their organization, but to the culture outside, and what's the temperature in the room, and what do people want. And I think the more that you can take these nuggets of influence and what this data is what story is this data trying to tell me, and incorporate that with your gut feel, then that's where you're going to see the greater success, and you're going to see the greater margins that you can do that. There's lots of different examples on that. Probably one that I think gets a lot of reference to, and we can use that now, is kind of like with the 9/11 event, and how to compensate people for their loss, of their loved ones, or their just the loss of what how it may have impacted them. during this horrible event. And there's been lots of studies and lots of research, but again, the data drove that. Now we're all thinking, yes, they used insurance tables, and that's what those insurance gurus are supposed to do. But maybe there was more influence there than just a 1 + 1 = 2 kind of calculation. And I think that's a really good example if you wanted to dive deep into a little bit more about the data-informed versus the data-driven. And it's a culture change, too, because you are shifting away from just using that gut feel and incorporating data. And I really feel like, that's a balance. Don't leave your gut feeling behind. It got you to where you are today. You're just adding another thing in your arsenal to make better decisions.
That is fantastic, Angela. The horse race analogy is so good, and the blinders are so good. I think that the trust in that mathematical equation has perhaps been lopsided, and there is just so much emphasis there in thinking that is the only intelligent way of approaching it. But I was just reading not too long ago an article from Gartner that was saying, don't throw away that gut instinctual feeling of executives that have run things well before and that actually can tell the things are coming, or that they know that numbers alone just doesn't cut it. How would you go about training an organization to have that right balance of trusting in what people bring to the table from their decision-making process plus the numbers? What would be a couple of things that you would say, this is how I would start, or encouragement to others to start training folks to think that way?
I think that what may be a really easy answer is, instead of just having on the chart, yes, we hit it, no, we didn't, black and white, yes or no, maybe have what I like to call variance explanations, or what's driving this? What is those 5 whys, or what is that root cause analysis that's really going on there? So, for example, if you just looked at some of my third-party risk alerts, if you will, are kind of going off right now because some of the larger firms in the market out there, whether they're a bank or technology or anything in between, some of the larger firms are starting to have some layoffs. So you start getting little alerts. Oh my goodness, your critical vendor is laying off its workforce. Alarms maybe should sound. But when you really, that's the data point, right? That's the data driver. Maybe we should go find a replacement critical vendor. But when you look at it a little bit further and you start to think about it a little bit more, you realize, oh, this is a technology firm, or a firm that has a lot of technology components to it. And when we went through the pandemic, they really built up because we were all at home, on our online devices, having Amazon deliver us all sorts of wonderful. It was Christmas every day at my house, from Amazon. So we were doing that. We were supporting that. Well, now the world has shifted, right? Yeah. And now we're starting to ride on airplanes again and go to hotels. So they don't need all of those extra workers that they need now. And what they're calling it is they're right-sizing themselves again, right, to the market. The market changed. I mean, we could also add on their inflationary terms, which are also supporting this decision and our economy as well. But if you were just focusing on that one alert, then you would miss the part that they're just in line with what everyone else is doing, and there's no real reason to put a siren out right now. There's no reason to do that. And I think that's the kind of example of, start asking, okay, I got this alert. Okay, my number's shy by X amount of dollars or percentage points. Let's start to do those 5 ways. Let's start to say, what decisions did we recently make that maybe they're driving that now, but the long-term goal can still be met. Yeah. Or we just need to tweak this or that, or, it's kind of like when we look at inflation right now, we haven't done that in 4 decades. Right. So we have to go ask the people from the 80s, what's going on? Dust up your playbook and bring it over here. Let's chat.
So true.
It's kind of those kind of questions, I think is really what it is. Don't just take it as a straight answer. Start asking more questions and have more conversations, because the more that you talk and you bring the people component in there and the communication component, you'll probably dig deep just just by having this conversation, that it just naturally happen as you go through and you start doing that. I think that's the big key, is just more communication.
More communication. And we have lessened that communication because now we are reporting to each other.
Yes.
Right? We're reporting at each other in a way, and not having that nuanced discussion that gets into the finer details. So you're bringing up excellent points. I agree. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. And I think that kind of brings me, or segues me into, there are a lot of tough decisions going on. And while some companies may be laying off or right sizing, I bet they're still having some problems doing talent acquisition as well. And I think that especially from a person like me who's got a smaller organization or even mid-sized, we've been struggling to compete with those larger firms for a long time now. Yeah. And as you know, I am not happy that anyone is getting laid off anywhere at any time. I am happy that they might want to come work here now and help me out and gain those kind of things. But what tools are available out there, or what tools are we going to use, and how can we leverage off of our data and our information assets to get there? And I think that you really see that in some of the predictive analytics that are available to us right now. If you think about it, it's not just HR data that can be used. HR data is a key component, don't get me wrong, but you definitely have maybe some finance and accounting type of data, maybe some operational data, maybe something with strategic alignment that you're watching that could kind of show you how the market's changing. Like, there's a lot of technology people out there right now. And what does that mean? Like, that means that we have tools and data. The data's driving, helping us decide, what does our workforce planning look like? What is the market telling us? What are all of these factors put together telling us? And that's really the perfect blend of both people and data, because it's more data put in one place that can help predict things. Now, a prediction is just a prediction. You do have to think for yourself and decide if that's what you want to do.
So true.
And what you want to go through. But I think it's a great pathway and a really great example of how what we're doing now is one of the, it has been a top struggle for a lot of us for a long time right now. And especially in this market where, unemployment's really low, but the job openings are really high and it's really competitive. And this talent acquisition component is really important. It's really interesting to also see how some of those predictive analytics can be used to determine, is this candidate the right fit for our company? Is it going to fit with our culture? Is it going to fit long term? Do we predict that they would be happy here and satisfied with their work content? And will they perform in their performance, or will they perform the way that we want them to? All of those components are built into this predictive analytics, but it's all because we can pull from all these different data sources and into this tool that allows us to do it. But it's really tailoring to a really big need right now, and it's available, and it's something that we could probably leverage in the long term. It's fixing a big hole, right? It's fixing a burden right now for us, but it could definitely go into those that in the long term, because there's just more pressure. We want to fill jobs efficiently. We don't want job openings to last out there for forever. But I do think that you see the higher mature organizations demonstrating to us these benefits. They're demonstrating that you can use analytical and reporting tools to build data integration capabilities, and that does help you understand employee behaviors. Obviously, behaviors are a human component, so you do have to add the human factor in there. But I really think it's a key segue in showing that all of this is dependent upon ongoing collaboration between people and technology. And that's really the key message. And this is a perfect example of doing this, because in the age of artificial intelligence, business success will increasingly depend on people and machines collaborating together. And that's one big area that I think is worth highlighting. And it's very interesting to me to kind of dive into because you're dealing with both behavior aspects as
Yeah.
well as analytical aspects.
I think that as you were mentioning in the first part of our conversation, that it is so important to bring in that judgment, that human discernment and judgment and assessment. And then we couple that now with the predictive aspect of the data, the analysis of the data, the science in the data, the intelligence. I wonder how you see the maturity in the effort placed in putting the right values in the data, or making sure that the algorithms are referencing data with the right semantics in those columns and in those tables, so that the ultimate forecasting can be created in the same manner as it was intended. So an executive, for instance, saying, I would like to get this out of the data, and maybe sometimes not unpacking that enough so that those 5 whys that you were referencing, right, getting to that very bottom, it's not an exercise data scientists get taught to do. Go on, ask the 5 whys, and not necessarily, not everybody does that. So how do we get to maximize that that coupled equation with both items at the data level?
I think when you get to the data level, I mean, it's the people that understand the data, right? The ones that use it day in and day out and see those data in that table or wherever it's located or that are inputting, they're the ones that are the most familiar. They're the ones that can tell you the story. They're the ones that can tell you what the numbers are going to look like before they get here. And I think that really understanding those key components are important because they're the ones that are going to be able to tell you that's just not right. You know, we can build in all sorts of quality checks, testing, all sorts of validation into what we're doing, into our process, and to ensure that it's coming out, you know, it spits out the right answer, for lack of a better term. But I really feel like it's those checkpoints are those people with the best knowledge of how the data is doing it, and how the data is, you know, is it produced, just because it's producing something we haven't seen before. If you remember, well, this is going to date me a little bit, but back several years ago, there were negative bond rates. We had never seen that before. Does that mean the data's wrong? How could you have a negative bond rate? It turned out, yes, it can occur. It's never occurred before, but the data is right. So there is those components where you do need those checks and balances, but that last bit of sanity check, for lack of a better word, or gut feel, or, you know, does this make sense in the real, you know, and just in the world that we deal with? Those types of checks are really how you kind of build it in and kind of get that kind of thing. I think it's just, we all want to just check the box and move on, right? We want to move fast, but sometimes we don't always get to move fast because no matter what automation we put in or what capabilities we put in, it's the people that are using it. We're not to the point where we have, you know, the artificial intelligence, deep learning that can, you know, act just like me, which is scary all by itself. We're not there yet. So we definitely need the human factor built in to remember those parts.
How do we tie all of that back to risk, back to your world of feeding off of the right data and what you need from others to get you that right data in the world of risk for the sake of innovation, for the sake of growth?
I do think that there's lots of components of risk that are involved, whether they're, we've kind of talked a little bit about using predictive analytics or relying upon the data. And I think that's key, and part of risk is because in risk we use tools, whether they're artificial intelligence, they're machine learning, they're bots, they're some sort of automation. But it all clearly goes back to the quality of the data that you're putting in. Because if you put in poor quality data, assuming the model is going to run perfectly, which is a whole risk all into itself, it's going to come out with a poor quality answer, right? Because what you put in is what you're going to get out. And I think there's a lot of focus on, you know, how do we make sure that we're putting in the right data components, number one, and that they're the correct values, and we know and understand what we're putting in. so that we can trust that what comes out. Because ultimately, the risk is that you don't trust the answer that comes out the other end, and you're making a poor business decision, or you have poor ramifications on the other end because you don't trust your data, or the data is incorrect or misused, or any of those other components that are in there. That's truly the underlying risk. I think that we see some of the bigger banks or in my world of banking, some of the bigger banks or more mature corporations have moved towards some of the artificial intelligence and the machine learning and all of those bots that are out there. And the model risk managers are out there, pulling their hair out and telling you, yes, we're trying to figure out how to deal with all of this. But what they will say is what the underlying component that they're relying upon, and they spend a lot of focus on, is, are we putting the right data in? And is that data accurate or cleansed or certified or whatever your magic word is to have it be accurate to go in? They spend a lot of time there. And it gets more complex, I think, with different types of data and different types of machine learning or artificial intelligence. I think in banking, as a general statement, just in general, BSA, AML, or anti-money laundering efforts, or knowing who your customer is type of thing to make sure that you don't have, seedy individuals or fraudulent individuals doing bad things. A lot of those tools are artificial intelligence, and they just cyclically, keep building off the data that they're using. So what is the risk is that if they continue building off data to make predictive components, are they building off the wrong data, and are they, quote unquote, learning the wrong thing? That's a really big, high risk area, high attention focused area. And therefore the model or the artificial intelligence itself gets a lot of scrutiny as well, because ultimately the data is the output, right? The data is driving whether or not we want to open that account with that person, and that there isn't any risk and they're not really laundering money to, fraudulent, bad people across the world. We don't want to facilitate that by any means, but people are sneaky. And so we have to use the data, and we have to use the tools available to us. And those are some of the big areas in there. Fraud, just in general, just as a general term, no matter what industry, I think there's a lot of artificial intelligence capabilities out there to help us with that, and really learning what those are and how to harness that, and then harness the data that we have is new. It's different. And maybe it's data we've never had before, and learning how to use it and how to obtain it, and those types of things. I think, it can be simpler too. Artificial intelligence can also be as simple as scanning in a financial statement and picking out the key components and putting it into our our application, our database, our system, whatever that capability or that input might be. But ultimately, it may not be making the decision, but it's providing the data in order as a decision component, right? And how accurate is it? We're relying on it. I'm hoping that if it says I made $1 million in income, that it doesn't come out to be $1.50 when they scan it. I was like, those are some of the risks that are involved with those types of things. That's very simplified, but they are definitely using those types of artificial intelligence, which are probably lower risk, as opposed to some of the more complex, like artificial intelligence around BSA or fraud. I think those are definitely there. I think we also get into all of those bots and those automations. I know at my smaller bank, we do have bots, but they're more around automation as opposed to actually learning component. Although I always say they're like one step away from entering into that realm, and it's something we have to be aware of. I think that's the other thing, is how much of this do we actually know is going on in our business, and that's a big risk too. Because not everybody's like, it just does this. It just makes my life easier. It's greatness. But, there's risk involved both, operationally, whether it's a people risk, whether it's a process or system risk, or whether it's a data risk. And it's all a governance risk in the end. And how much are we willing to tolerate by using all of these things? And I think that's where the real balance is when you start looking at your risk tolerances. Just because you put a tolerance next to a number, put some context around that and really think about what that means. going forward.
And Angela, as you were referencing that certified state of data, right, in AI or ML and the production of those insights from it, there's a threshold of tolerance that every organization needs to define for themselves and within their industry as to what is acceptable in the margin of error. And how do you see that moving or staying the same? Do you see that in the world of ML, AI, it is higher or lower than maybe physical safety or physical assurances from a risk perspective?
I heard this reference to kind of what you're talking about is that, let's just use the economy and inflation and say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how scared should we be? 10 being, we're going to take all of our money in cash out of the bank. We're all going to have it in cash. We're going to stuff it in our mattress. Then we're going to bury the mattress and park the car on top of the mattress. I was like, is that where we should be? And I was like, would you feel secure if it was all locked in a vault? Maybe you put some armed guards around the car too. Would that make you feel better? And I was like, perhaps, perhaps that might work. But those are the same, although funny, and reference is the same type of feeling that you're going for security about these risk thresholds and what they do. And I really think that the answer is always, ask a tax expert. You'll get the same answer on your tax return. It depends. And I think that's what it means, here is it depends. How significant of an impact is it having? What does it really mean if we move it one way or the other? If you think about a bank and loans, you look at the market and you look at inflation and you look at interest rates and you look at some other economic conditions among other components, and you kind of say, should I pull in and make it really stringent now because it's there's a lot of risk out there, or there's a lot less risk and I have enough liquidity here, we can open it up and we can raise that threshold. I think that's the same component with data, that maybe some of us aren't normally used to thinking of it in that terms. So then we have to start thinking of, well, how much error or how much validation, discongruity or between two systems, how much are we okay with? I mean, it's not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
We're not going to achieve perfection. And I think that should first and foremost be known. But how comfortable are we? And it's probably going to be different depending on the type of decision being made, or the type of complexity or criticality, if you will, the criticality and impact to what you're doing. If I scan a document and put in the numbers and then have spot checks to validate that it's going in correctly, percentage correction and types of things, that makes sense. Those types of quality controls. Do I feel like that's good enough? That's probably good enough. I probably feel okay about that. Now, if I have something that's like stress testing and how much money I should hold back in case, there's a huge bank run and the economy falls apart and everybody wants all their money back, and I have to make sure I can do that, some of those data controls are going to be a little higher because I'm making bigger decisions that have a huge monetary effect and affect a lot of people. So I think there's a gauge there too. And I think there's going to be trial and error there. I think it's going to be understanding the complexity and the impact of what you're doing, and then how much can I change it and feel comfortable and be okay. And I think that some of that's going to be a struggle for some of us, and it probably, again, depends on the type of decision that you're making, and you'll probably go back and forth a few times too. And there's outside impact. There's outside influences that happen all the time, and they're going to change that decision as well as my lights go out. So I talk to the lights.
So Angela, leave us with an Angelism, as you mentioned the last time. You've got this elevator talk opportunity, or this moment at the elevator with the CEO of the organization, and you want to make him or her remember what you're training them on, what you're educating them on based on this topic. What would that be?
I think that what I would tell him is that, as we move forward, there are so many tools and so many data points that we have to take advantage of these strategic opportunities to allow a tool or a mechanism to process and understand and learn, if you will, more data than one human will ever be able to expect it to do. It's just completely outside of our capabilities. But let's remember that we got here from your gut feeling, from your family's gut feeling, from your leadership. I was like that because I'm privately owned. And that's what got you here. So I want you to use that, but I want you to garnish this great treasure chest of tools and data that's out there to help show you what the landscape is in a way that you've never seen before. It's kind of like being able to maybe not being able to see very well and getting a new pair of glasses. And you think, whoa, did you always have green jacket? Like, I never noticed that before. It's kind of those types of opportunities, and we're really back to the horse race, and not making decisions with the blinders on, and really being able to embrace and feel confident that we've put the governance in so you can embrace and you can run faster and you can hit the goal.
Excellent summary. Angela, thank you for your thought leadership, for your wisdom, for your intelligence, and for the way in which you convey in simple terms really complex concepts and underlying things that are going on in the financial industry, as well as in all the others as it relates to data and risk and opportunities. Stay tuned for the audience. There is more from Angela to come. So thank you, Angela, for being with us today.
Thank you, ma'am.